Okay, so let's start talking about variables. What is a variable? A variable is a name that we assign to a particular value. For example, let's say that I want to store my name in a variable. I want to store it so I can use it later on in my program. Because when you just write a particular value in a programming language like this, 56 or hello, that value will not be stored. And you will not be able to use it in your program anymore, just on that particular line. If you want to store it and use it multiple times throughout the code and have the possibility to update it, then you need a variable. They act like containers. When you create a variable, that variable has a particular place in memory where that value will be stored, and every time that you use that particular name, you will be able to access the value. So let's see this concept in action. Let's say that I want to store the name Stefania. You can write your name right here, and I want to store it in the variable called name. Every time that I use this particular name, this particular variable, I will be accessing this value. So let's use print, which is a function, to do something in our code, and we are going to print or show in the terminal that particular name, the value of that variable. Let's see what we get. If you open the terminal again and you press the up arrow key, you will get the last command that you executed, that you ran. So that's super helpful too to save you some time. Or you can write the command again, that's totally okay. If you press enter, you will see the output. But the output is the value of that variable. We don't see name literally right here. We see Stefania. And you should see your name printed here. So variables are like containers. We assign them a particular name, and that name should be descriptive of what they represent. For example, I would not assign the name color to this value because it doesn't represent a color. It represents a name. So that's super important too. That is a best practice in programming, assigning descriptive variable names. There are some rules that you should follow when you write variable names. First, a variable name must start with a letter or an underscore. Usually, they start with a letter and underscores are used for specific purposes. Then a variable name cannot start with a number, so you can't write something like this, okay? You will see an error. So we see an error because Python is not really detecting that this is a variable name, because it breaks the rules. Those errors in how we write the code are called syntax errors. The syntax is how we write a program in a particular programming language, like all the rules that you have to follow for the program to run correctly. Great, so now we have this, and the program is working again. Let's save it. Another rule is that a variable name can only contain alphanumeric characters and underscores. So a variable name can only have these characters: letters, uppercase and lowercase letters from A to C, so it would be like this. They can also contain numbers, but they cannot start with a number, but they can have a number in between, like, for example, name 1, that would be valid too. Name 5, you can also have numbers in the middle, but that's not so common. It's usually recommended to write descriptive variable names and names that are easy to read. And you can also use underscores. Actually, that's the recommended way to separate different words in a variable name. Like, for example, if I have a variable, my name, since these are two different words, I would separate them with an underscore and write the entire variable name in lowercase. That's another naming convention in Python. This naming style is called a snake case. There are several different ways to separate words in variable names, and every programming language has different conventions, different agreements among the developer community on what is the best way to write them. Some programming languages separate words with a hyphen that is called kebab case. Some of them separate them with an underscore, snake case. And some of them, like JavaScript, separate them with an uppercase letter that is called camel case. In Python, we use a snake case. And another key thing about variables is that they are case sensitive. So if we write this variable in uppercase, and then we try to use it in our program in lowercase, like this, it will not work. We see that name is not defined. Why? Because the variable is not defined in the program. Here we used uppercase letters, and we have to write it in exactly the same way as we defined it. Let's undo that, and now the program is working again. Great! Now, a variable can be updated. We don't have to have a particular fixed value for that variable. Once we create the variable in memory, we can update its value. So if I want to change the name during the execution of the program, for some reason, to Nora, I can do that. And then from that point forward, while I run the program, the variable name will now refer to the value Nora. So let's check this. Let's print name again. We are defining the variable initially with the value Stefania. Then we are printing it. And then we are updating it. And then we are printing it again. So let's see. If we open the terminal and we run the program again, we can see the output, Stefania, and then Nora. We are using the same variable. As you can see right here, we are using the same variable, but right here we are updating its value. So you can see that the variable is more like a container or a box in memory, where we can store values, and we can update them. And the variables do not have to have a particular type of value. Here we are storing a value that is like text. It's called a string in programming, and we will see much more about strings during the course. But right here we could update it to a number. Usually we don't do that because it really depends on what we need, and usually we keep that particular data type. But it is possible, like this. We change from a string, text, to a number. That's possible, but usually we don't do this because usually if a name is represented by text, then updating the name should also be represented by text. But it is possible. Great, let's see another example. Let's define a variable called favorite game. If you click here on the Explorer, you can close this while we don't need to use the Explorer. Okay? Let's say that my favorite game is Super Mario Bros. I'm going to show the value of this variable, and then I am going to update it to Pac-Man. Try to predict the output. What do you think will be the output of this program? First, we are assigning this text, Super Mario Bros, to the variable favorite game. And then we are printing it. And then we are updating the value to Pac-Man, and we are printing it again. Let's open the terminal, and now let's run the command again to run the program. And we see the output, Super Mario Bros, and then Pac-Man. We updated the value of the variable favorite game. Great, so now you know how to define a variable and how to update its value. Different types of values have different data types. And in Python we have many different data types that we can work with to write really powerful programs. So let's continue. In the next part, we will talk about data types and how to work with them in Python.